is up. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President, and it's a pleasure to rise to give further support to the Medical Research Future Fund Bill. I think it's a very important initiative supporting what is a very successful industry for our country, and an industry that provides massive amounts of jobs, but more importantly has huge future potential going forward, and it's to the great service of that this government has committed such a large level of resources to back that sector, to underpin that sector, and to make sure that we do take full opportunities that are arising in this sector. And I want to start with a more prosaic example, with something from my state in Queensland. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit a medical products firm just south of Brisbane at Mount Gravatt called Cook Medical, and it's actually a part of a large conglomerate, an overseas conglomerate based in the United States, but it does a substantial amount of manufacturing here in Australia, and indeed the headquarters of Cook Medical choose this particular part of Australia to do this manufacturing because of the skills, because of the capabilities, and because of our general environment that is conducive to these products. And indeed, we should celebrate more than we perhaps get to do businesses like Cook Medical, because they produce fantastically innovative and wonderful medical products that do save people's lives and improve the quality of people's lives. They themselves specialise, they produce a range of products, but they specialise in stents, and I did not know anything about stents until a few years ago, and my grandmother got quite sick and had a stent inserted. And when you first, I suppose, hear about how these things work, you wonder who comes up with this sort of idea that will stick something up your leg and put it up all the way up to your heart, and that'll make you feel better. I sort of feel for the first person that had to go under that operation as a guinea pig, but it did work. It worked, and they've only been there for, I think, less than 20 years or so. We've had stents, and they've saved thousands, if not probably tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people's lives, and extended their lives, and they've certainly extended my grandmother's life, so I'm very thankful to it. Now, Cook Medical don't just produce stents for people like my grandma here in Australia, they export them across the world. Indeed, when I went to see them, they were producing stents for patients in Japan. They'd receive an MRI scan of a Japanese patient, and they'd look specifically to see what product they should produce and supply to that person. Amazing technology that's only going to grow, that's probably only going to become more customised, and produce more opportunities for Australia to be part of this sector, not just to be in the business of saving people's lives, but also to create jobs, to create opportunity for very smart young Australians who want a future career. Because I met a young lady there who had just come out of Griffith University in Brisbane, and she'd been given a job there as I think a graduate, and an opportunity because of what they produce there in Brisbane. But it's not just for the tertiary graduates as well. They have a whole floor of people manufacturing stents, and it's effectively pretty much what you'd see in a textiles or clothing factory. It's rows and rows of people at sewing machines and other knitting facilities creating a stent. And where it's become clearly difficult for businesses in Australia to specialise in things like textiles and clothing, relatively labour-intensive forms of manufacturing. It's manufacturing like this that we do have a future opportunity in, because it's value-adding to a business that is of high value, that has a high level of customisation, and therefore the issues of scale economies and the issues of mass production aren't as prevalent or as keenly felt. So Cook Medical explained to me that they wouldn't think of outsourcing the manufacturing of these particular products overseas, because of the natural advantages they have of being here in Australia, being close to the design team that designs the stents. It's very important to have that communication between those designing these products and those manufacturing them, because what can seem like a good idea in theory or in design may not be practical in manufacture, and it helps the designers get things right when they've got the people actually making the products so close by. So it's a great positive news story for for our manufacturing sector, for our medical sector and for our innovation sector. And it's these sectors that we should seek to promote and support more, and it's a great initiative of the government to establish a medical research fund, a substantial fund that we hope to grow to $20 billion over years, a fund that will be starting with $1 billion from the Health and Hospitals Fund of the former government, and a fund that we hope to provide $400 million in additional research and development funding over the forward estimates. And that sort of money, I think, will not just fill a gap in the medical sector, it has the potential to fix some of the issues that we have in our broader innovation sector, or our innovation sectors, you'd probably call them, that use innovation. Certainly the medical sector is one of those. Right now, we have a Senate Economics Committee inquiry into innovation, and one of the issues that have arisen in that inquiry, it's not one that's new to policy making, but certainly one that's been emphasised in that inquiry, is that we do very well as a country. We do very well at producing ideas. We do very well at having high-quality researchers. We rank highly on our ability to produce high-quality research, and our universities are remunerated to make sure through the ERA rankings that they do produce high-quality research. The issue sometimes we have is translating that research, that high-quality research, from good ideas, from good papers published in good journals, to actually commercialising into products that sell money, create jobs and create wealth. We do fall down on those measures. So while we're one of the highest countries in the world for producing those sort of published papers, we're actually at the bottom of the table in the OECD in terms of commercialising those ideas into some kind of sellable product. And I hope, and while I note that the detailed projects that the Medical Research Future Fund will fund are yet to be worked out, and will be worked out through the governance arrangements defined in this bill, I do hope that there is a focus by the advisory board, the Australian Medical Research Advisory Board, that will be established under this framework. I do hope that they do consider the need to invest more heavily, or to concentrate more heavily on commercialising what the good work that we already do in the medical field into commercial, sellable products that support businesses here in Australia. I note that that board, that Medical Research Advisory Board, will develop a Australian Medical Research and Innovation Strategy, and also Australian Medical Research and Innovation Priorities. And I do hope that those sort of things are considered, and certainly I'm sure by the time that strategy and those priorities get to be set, the Senate Economics Committee hopefully would have wrapped up and reported on its innovation report, and perhaps we could point out a few things in this field we think should be done, because we do have a very large opportunity here with this fund, and it would be remiss not to completely maximise that funding opportunity. We are hoping to establish this fund, this $20 billion fund, as a capital reserve, as something that would be put a platform and a base into medical research funding in this country. And I think Senator Edwards may have raised the point about how important it is that we do have some stability here for people in this sector, because many of the products that are developed in this sector, indeed probably most of them, require an investment timeline, a payoff period of decades, not just years. It's a very risky area where investments may not pay off. So I think it is a sector that more than most require some form of stability from government, some form of continuity, and I do very much hope that if this bill is passed and if this fund is established, that we do ensure over many parliaments and different governments that it does continue and continues to fund research in a stable and continuous fashion for the medical research sector, because it's not a sector that could cope well or would respond well to ups and downs of different funding and different decisions. If that was what we were to do, it would certainly dent confidence in that sector, and certainly perhaps limit the leverage that this fund might generate in the private sector, because while this is a substantial substantial investment of public resources into medical research in our country. It is something, of course, we hope that would be leveraged to create an even more substantial investment from the private sector in medical research in this country. And that will only happen if a stable and consistent policy environment is delivered. We'll make sure that the new fund ensures that Australia continues to advance the world-leading medical research projects that we are lucky enough to have housed here, that we continue to attract and retain first-class researchers and ultimately deliver better health outcomes for all Australians. Because one thing we do have to tackle, not just here in this country but across the world, is to ensure that we can continue to improve how we deliver health services in a cost-effective way. It is no secret that health funding, both public and private, in this country and indeed all around the world, is growing at very, very high rates of growth. That will probably, the pressure on that will probably only continue as our population ages and as new customised medical products are developed. But we do have a limit. We do have a limit, and we need to make sure that the health budget we do have in this country, which is substantial, is spent in the ways that deliver the biggest bang for the buck. Because if we don't do that, two things will happen. If we don't do that, we'll both have to find more money to pay for these things, or restrict services that are available, and we won't be able to fund as many life-saving and life-improving products as we could. So we have an obligation. We have an obligation to make sure that our medical research fund, our hospitals and health funds more generally are spent efficiently, and investments in research and development through this fund can help make sure that happen. So that will make sure that we do deliver a sustainable health system into the future and enable vital research that will lead to the discovery of new medicines and technologies to use for the prevention, treatment and care of all Australians. All Australians therefore stand to develop from ongoing investments in medical research through this fund, both directly through improved medical health and indirectly by supporting enhanced productivity and economic growth. As I've said earlier, it will also make sure we build on the huge opportunities that exist in our medical research and innovation sector and help deliver a more sustainable health system. There have been various funds established in the last few years by different governments, and some have raised the question about why establish a new fund. Well, this fund, we want to achieve a few things. We want to focus on research because we think that's a great opportunity for our nation, as I have outlined. We want it to be capital protected so that we continue to have an ongoing, stable amount of money there to support research that is not dived into to fund various, sometimes politically motivated programs. And we want to deliver a national approach for medical research and innovation across the entire country. And with that in mind, this bill does provide for funds to be distributed to state or Commonwealth corporations that are engaging in medical research. We have announced this fund in the latest. We announced in the latest budget. We announced it last budget, but we announced in the latest budget that it was due to commence on the 1st of August, subject to passing this legislation. Obviously, that date has passed, but once it has passed, we will establish this fund and, as I've said, transfer that $1 billion from the Health and Hospitals Fund. There has been a delay, therefore, in the commencement of this fund, and it will impact the level of investment earnings over time, but the estimates that have been provided previously in the budget will be revised later this year. And of course, this is a fund that will eat what it kills, basically. It will, for whatever it makes and funds, it will be able to spend. So while there are certain estimates in the budget, it's the finalised spending of this fund will be determined by the earnings of the fund itself, which will be governed by the future fund, as are other funds in the Commonwealth. So I do applaud the government for focusing on this area, because I think there are huge opportunities for our country in medical research. It already underpins thousands of jobs. It is an area that has been highlighted both by the Chief Scientist, Ian Chubb, and in the government's STEM policy and industry policy, industry growth centres last year. This fund helps and complements those policies to ensure that we do in fact, take the great opportunities that exist to provide healthcare here to Australians here, but also to the burgeoning middle class in Asia, which will be certainly demanding better health outcomes. And what better country to provide those than one in their time zone with a proven track record in providing innovative and new health outcomes. So, and I thought it might be
Being 7:20, the Senate